Hello, I'm Joseph Urshana, the Executive Director and Vice President of the Native Biodata Consortium, the first ever 501c3 biological sample and data repository housed within the geographic border and legal jurisdiction of the American Indian Nation. And here I'm just going to give you a small sample of this engagement with Elsie's Friday Forum for ELSI Hub CERA. And then I will link in the comments below the actual Vimeo link for ELSI Hub. And you can go and listen to the whole thing there.
Welcome to our October ELSI Friday Forum of the 2024-2025 academic year. My name is Mildred Cho, co-director with Sandra Sujin Lee of the Center for ELSI Resources and Analysis. I'm delighted that you have joined us for CERA's ELSI Friday Forum session today entitled The Summer Internship for Indigenous Peoples in Genomics, Beyond Settler Science. The ELSI Friday Forum is organized by CERA, which is funded by the National Human Genome Research Institute and provides resources through the ELSI Hub. This forum is in collaboration with instructors from the SING Consortium, a CERA partner organization, and will focus on the distinctive features of their educational programs, related research, and community collaborations that aim to decolonize and make useful genomics for Indigenous peoples. There are many resources on elsihub.org. I encourage you to join the ELSI Scholar Directory, sign up for our newsletter and daily updates and news on LinkedIn and Twitter, and for some quick logistical information about closed captioning, the Q&A feature, and the chat for this webinar, please see the information dropped in the chat below. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session. Please note that the full bios can be read in the chat. So Dr. Kim TallBear, PhD, Sitaton Wapaton Oyate, is Professor and Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Peoples, Technoscience and Society, Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta. Please find her full bio in the chat. I'm delighted to welcome Kim and turn the session over to her.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to just give a little bit of an overview of the importance, I think, of the panel and the two speakers you're going to hear today. So I'm part of the founding faculty for SING USA, Summer Internship for Indigenous Peoples in Genomics, or was a lot over a decade ago, and also a founder of SING Canada, a program that emerged later. So I've seen in 10 plus years of the SING program that works at the intersection of Indigenous governance and genomics, I've seen a lot of pretty interesting change. I've seen us go from having non-Indigenous scientists wanting to include and train Indigenous people in genomics. I've seen us go from that kind of mode of inclusion to Indigenous-led genomics and an Indigenous-led SING organization. I've seen the sparking of other Indigenous controlled programs, one of which you'll hear about today. Thus us having more visible Indigenous leadership in national and international genomics research and conversations, and also in data governance conversations globally. So where we are now, 10, 15 years after the founding of SING USA, is we are in an era of moving way beyond inclusion. We're growing Indigenous community control of genomics, as well as training Indigenous scientists. And when those two groups work together, Indigenous communities and Indigenous scientists, what you see is growing Indigenous governance through science and of science. And so you'll hear a lot about that today. So I'm going to introduce our two panelists now who are a part of this important movement that I've just described. The first speaker will be Joseph Iracheta. Joe holds an MS in pharmacogenomics, and he's a candidate for a PhD in environmental health sciences and engineering. He's an Amerindigenous scientist, Purepecha from Mexico, and executive director of the Native Biodata Consortium, which you'll hear about. Our second speaker will be Dr. Elizabeth Nelson, or Betsy. She is a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and Anishinaabe Nation in what is now North Dakota, and an assistant professor at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. Betsy is a biological anthropologist and a microbial genomicist and has been involved with the summer internship for Indigenous Peoples in Genomics Canada for 3 years. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleagues.
Here's a clip from 14 minutes. So here we can recognize that we have our own risks during the big data and omics era, but we hope that we can be the canary in the coal mine for any number of countries, ethnicities, and social groups. We hope that we can have a clear articulation of our issues with big data and omics, and will facilitate the same conversations for other marginalized groups. Click through. The common rule in the Belmont report cannot foresee today's complicated and compromised tech and data landscape. I implore all of the ethicists, lawyers, and scientists listening today, can we afford in the 21st century the pretense of altruism and later be judged by future populations as having dropped the ball at this critical crossroads, a crossroads that is unique in time and technology to right the wrongs of the past? Should we be reenacting the doctrine of discovery again with scientific neocolonialism? Click through. And with that, I hand it over to Dr. Nelson. Here's a clip from 26 minutes.
That have been built with Sing Canada and other initiatives for Indigenous-led science are so important, so that we can begin to indigenize these scientific spaces and be the ones to tell our own stories. And many participants have genomic training already, and many of them will never go into genomics, but they learn how our data are used and can be used, and why it's important that we protect our data and we protect our science. And we also have, you can see the images here where we've been doing community engagement, relationship building, and where we begin our research at that place, where we have a visioning session with the rest of the different Sings that are around to talk about the directions that we're going, where we have our visiting guest speaker, Dr. Crystal Sosi, who is talking to us about our data, and our lectures from our different faculty that are there, and our active research that's taking place. So it's so much more than learning to load a nanopore. It's discussions and lectures on considering what happens with the products of research and the importance of governance in our data, and by extension, authority over the research conducted on our people and in our space. And so for those allies listening, many of you are making efforts in practicing ethical research and in this movement of decolonizing DNA. But I invite you to question some of the recurring principles I've seen in these conversations. So ethical, think about this. Whose standards are these? Who's defining these ethics? Is it the community you're researching with or researching on? And also think about, how are you defining your engagement? Let's be clear as well that engagement does not mean that you have built or established relationships. Often engagement is just a way of talking to these communities and getting these permits and permissions. And then it's considered respectful research. So then you need to consider, how are you evaluating your research as respectful, by whose terms, and what are the actual benefits of inclusion for Indigenous people? Who's benefiting from that inclusion? And in the end, a good way to evaluate this is thinking about what decolonizing DNA research actually is. And that is the building toward the restoration of Indigenous land and life. That's it. So examine your research by that mark. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody's attention and all of these wonderful people here that have contributed to this work.
And here's a clip from 42 minutes.
And I think perhaps for a while, Australia was also training non-Indigenous people. I think that would be an important program for Indigenous people to train non-Indigenous people how to work better. But for the time being, given our limited resources and capacity in Sing Canada, we're only focusing on Indigenous participants. And so I don't know if Betsy and Joe have anything to add to that.
I would say what you just said about having a program where Indigenous researchers and scholars are training scientists on how to be better, on how to work better in this way. I love this idea. It's been brought up several times. There are many, many people who are non-native who really want to be involved, but recognize the space as what it is, but are asking like, how can I support this, or what can I do? Like I've been asked before, do you guys have reading, like a reading list that I could have or anything like this? People really want these resources, especially with this newer generation. And so I feel like if people think this is a good idea, you should be a little bit more vocal about it. Let us know. We can get that support and like have something like this, because I think it would be important.
And that's about all I'm going to play for you guys. We are wonderfully happy for partners like CERA ELSI HUB and others. You can go and click on the link below to watch the whole hour in its entirety. And you can look to our playlist to look at others in our colleague stable or list or partners and see the things that they talk about, see the topics that are important for Indigenous people, look at the computational and technical logistics of doing all of this work, as well as how they interface with public health, law, and international policy when it comes to working with Indigenous populations around the world. And with that, I thank you for your attention. And please go to ELSI Hub CERA's website and look up a lot of the amazing ethical topics found there. Thank you.